Okay. So we
All
can,
right, so we are recording.
and we call the November 17th meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission to order. Dan, would you do the roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Clark,
Here.
Vice Chair McCann,
Here.
Commissioner Baker,
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan,
Here.
Commissioner Friedman,
Here.
Commissioner Baker, Futterman,
Here.
Commissioner Garrett,
Here.
Commissioner Gauthier,
Here.
and Commissioner Miller.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome the commissioners, staff members, and visitors. There'll be a time for public comments later in the meeting if any of the visitors have them. Please keep your microphones muted during the meeting, and please raise your hand to be called to speak at the appropriate time, and then unmute your microphones. And please do not use the chat feature in Zoom. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. It was posted on Thursday, November 12th for city policy. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
I move to accept the agenda.
Second.
Second, Carl, thank you. Any discussion about the agenda? All in favor of accepting the agenda, please say aye.
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 Okay, the agenda has been accepted. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to staff comments by Patrick. A number of them have been covered in a memo in the agenda packet, but feel free to discuss any of them. Patrick.
Sure, thank you. So as Rory mentioned, we did list a lot of things in the update memo. So I just wanted to highlight a few updates and changes. So in terms of council meeting topics, the commercial waste and recycling ordinance did go through its second reading, and there was no discussion. And so that is passed. And so that'll go into effect in 30 days. The EV charging streamlined permitting topic that we thought was going to go forward on November 12th did not. So that was pulled. So I'm coordinating with folks internally to get that back on the agenda in December. And then the Sustainability Scholarship Program presentation did not happen. That was also pulled due to time concerns. So I'll just report on that in December, at the December meeting. And then I did want to mention that I thought we had talked about this before, but Dan will be retiring at the end of the year. And so we officially got today the approval for the job announcement posting. So we will be posting that probably early next week, if not by the end of the week. So I'll be sending that out and around to folks. And I imagine there will be some interest in that. And so we'll do some interviews here over the next couple of months and hopefully select somebody and have them in place in January timeframe. So next month will be Dan's last meeting. So we will virtually salute him at that meeting. So, and then just I think I put the info in there for the shredding and e-waste event. It was a big success, and about 5 tons of paper that was shredded, and we had a whole truckload of e-waste, but we haven't gotten the data on that yet. So we're following up with them to get some more data on that. Other than that, I think that's about all that I wanted to touch on at the moment. Any questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Next, we move on to public comments. This is time for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. The Commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Do we have anybody to make public comments? I know we do have 2 visitors. I guess not. So now we'll move on to presentations. The presentation section tonight is a little bit different than we normally have. Typically, when we have presentations, they're from outside speakers who have some issue that they would like to bring to our attention. The three presentations this evening are from commissioners, and the presentations are based upon comments that were made at the end of the October meeting, where when we go around the room, so to speak. The topics were such that they weren't developed enough to have them as new business and to necessarily make a recommendation, although that is possible. But we wanted to have more time for the speakers, Commissioner Flanagan, Commissioner Futterman, and Commissioner Garrett, to talk about what they had brought up at the October meeting. And then we can decide if we want to take a position, if we want to carry these things further and make a recommendation, and we can discuss them at a subsequent meeting. So the first presentation is from Jim Flanagan, talking about fees at the Barristo parking structure. And you have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, all right, 5:42, I'll make note. First off, did everyone get my, I sent out a single sheet. I think Daniel sent it out yesterday, so hopefully you all had a chance to see it. If not, I'm just gonna try and run through it really quickly and maybe take some questions at the end. So my premise here is that the city should move away from subsidized parking for private autos. And it's sort of based on how much subsidies there are for fossil fuels right now, and how, you know, the Paris Accord, they're really trying to diminish or get rid of subsidies entirely. And parking, free parking is greatly subsidized by the city. It reduces incentives for people to walk, bike, carpool, car share, ride share, take transit. And those funds could be used to fund free parking. To fund bicycle paths and amenities such as shade trees and bike share and things like that. So underneath my premise, I've listed 7 or 9 things that I'm going to talk about real quickly. And then I have a recommendation at the end that I kind of want to mention. So first thing I found in my research was Measure J. You know, they surveyed everyone that said everyone did want free parking, but I think people need to look at it as, you know, do you want to pay the cost of parking, whether you're going to use it or not? Because your tax money is what's used for that. And I found a lot of great information in a book I footnoted at the bottom called The High Cost of Free Parking, if you're really interested in how subsidies work and free parking in city government. The second one is I've met more and more tourists that come to Palm Springs, and I noticed that a lot of my volunteer work for Desert X, they don't get cars. They stay at the Saguaro, or they stay downtown, they stay at the Chase, or they stay at the Ace Hotel, and they either use car share, or they use bikes, or they just sit by the pool all day. So I think we'd like to support some of those people and encourage them to continue doing that. The third point is that the urban core does not have enough parking right now. If any of you have gone out on a Friday or Saturday night in season, searching for a spot is tough. If the parking was priced accordingly, it would be much easier to know that there's always going to be a spot in a downtown lot. Based on what my research found, that the American driver spends a lot of time driving around looking for parking, and this would sort of eliminate that on some of our busiest weekends for people who wanted a sure thing place to park. I discovered in that book too that the typical parking spot is not cheap to build. 5 or 10,000 for a surface lot, 25 or 50,000 for a garage. I tried to get Barristo parking garage numbers, but I wasn't able to find them. But if you multiply the conservative value of 25,000 times its 300 spaces, it's about a $9 million lot that we're giving away for free. I did a little background on how many downtown lots there are. There's about 900 public parking spaces around. The museum revitalization specifically adds another about 1,000 spaces, 450 private parking spaces, and a whole bunch of free street parking is also available. I think it was brought up at the last meeting that other cities don't really charge, and that's true. Indian Wells and El Paseo don't charge, but parking garages in other big resort attraction cities, more similar to Palm Springs, such as Malibu and Carmel, are charging $3 an hour. And it goes up from there and bigger as you get close to bigger areas like San Diego, where it ranges from $3 to $10 an hour. So the next thing I did is I tried to do a little back of the envelope calculation for parking revenue. And I looked at just the Barristo garage, which is what I'm promoting, suggesting the city look at as a trial. Those 374 spaces, if they were filled 12 hours a day at $1 an hour, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, results in about $630,000 a year. I bring this up just because the city is at a difficult time in its budget. They're cash strapped. They definitely need money. Obviously, this wouldn't occur all summer long, but there's leeway in there to play between $1 and $3 an hour. Somebody else brought up last week the cost of implementation, and I learned a lot about parking payment apps such as Parking Kitty and Park Mobile. You do everything online on your phone and you pay for parking that way. Those apps provide municipalities with all sorts of metrics and demographics to determine how parking is being used, who's using it, when they're using it, things like that. So what I would recommend at the end, I put here are two things. One, that the Sustainability Commission recommends that the city consider implementation of paid parking on a trial basis at the downtown lot in Indian Canyon. I would also add to that those funds be clearly designated to go to help with some of the sustainability goals as far regarding transportation. And the second one, and maybe Carl, you might have some thoughts on this, but in addition, I'd like the general plan just to be revised to include support for transition to a fee-based parking study in the downtown core. This might be in the form of a parking study or something like that. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to do my best at them. And otherwise, I'm gonna, if this is something people are interested in, I'll come up with some more specific language next meeting.
A question.
Yes.
Yes, Carl. So I like all the work you've done. However, I think you're going to get enormous pushback from Main Street merchants. Having free parking is one of the big bonuses for people coming in, especially from LA and San Diego, where they don't have to pay to park, where they don't have to use valet parking. As someone who drove out here for 10 years every weekend, trust me, you look forward to just being able to pull your car in and park and not deal with the hassle of doing anything else. So I think especially with the downturn in business, Main Street merchants may not be too excited about the idea of charging for parking.
I totally agree with that. And I think the thing to look at is what I'm really initially proposing is that we just look at Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. My experience is that lot is jam-packed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's impossible to find parking. So I think that would, I don't think it's gonna have that much of an effect on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but you're right. I think it's gonna have an effect. The city providing subsidized parking on weekend or weekdays is gonna have more of an effect. And again, this is a recommendation that the council can choose to ignore or at its discretion, but it's something we have to weigh the revenue that would be involved versus continuing to provide the subsidy that tourists and the businesses benefit. So I agree, Carl. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion or questions?
Yes, I have a question. On number 4, you said that people spend a lot of time driving around looking for parking, and I don't understand how charging for parking, that doesn't increase the number of spaces in the urban core. So how does that help solve that problem?
So a good example are some of big cities like Portland and San Francisco. So they charge for parking in order to keep about 5% of the spaces always available. So what would happen is they would raise the price until it would be the price equals demand and that there are spaces available. So you knew reliably if you drove down to the Bristow garage, there'd be a space available. What that also means is since parking is going to be a little bit tougher to get or more expensive, more people would have to consider things like ride shares or car shares or walking or taking their bicycles or other means of getting downtown. It doesn't add more parking. It provides more funds if you want to build more parking, I suppose. But I think it's this time of use thing that allows people to be sure there are spaces rather than having just to drive around to find them.
I sort of take issue with the idea. It's usually at night that there's the parking issue on the weekends. It's not really the middle of the day. Not that I go downtown that much in the middle of the day,
right?
On a weekend, but you're not going out to dinner or going to the newly restored downtown theater whenever that may open on a bicycle. If anything, you're going to take a ride share or you're going to drive. The public bus is not really an option in Palm Springs, and Buzz Bus future is uncertain, if anything.
I agree, and that's why what I'm suggesting is just on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where most of the time this would be night till 10. Say if they did it from, I don't know, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. It'd be more of the busy times. But no, it doesn't add any more spaces, but it just means the people who are using spaces, will have to pay for them rather than this being coming out of the city budget. So there's pluses and minuses, and yeah, you're right. Free parking would be great for everyone to have, but
Oh, and
I think
there's one actual additional issue. This especially down by Trio and Copley's. People park in the residential area behind it, and that's causing the residents a lot of agita. In fact, they're considering putting up restricted parking for those residential streets to keep employees and customers from parking going up into Las Palmas.
That was my point, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I am one of those people. I no longer keep a car, so it's a non-issue for me. But I know for my neighbors, it's a tremendous problem, and they've spent a lot of time contacting the city back and forth constantly, and there's a lot of grief for it. But what happens then is you just have people then parking on residential streets and then walking to the restaurant or club that they're going to. But that causes a problem for residents even during the weekdays. So it's something to be considered for people who do live here or have businesses here.
And
So,
that is,
Senator, one of the things I ran across was I found the city of Santa Rosa, a lot of cities do parking studies. So they look at the amount of parking they need for all these different businesses, and they look at spillover, and they look at neighborhoods. And that's one of the things we might recommend in the general plan, is that the city, look at doing a parking study to investigate pricing, as an approach, as a way to deal with a lot of the new construction going on and in the future in Palm Springs. But neighborhood parking would be part of that.
Jim, a parking study was just done about 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. I wasn't been able to find it. Do you know
Yeah,
where to
it's
get
right
it?
back when Jeff came into office. So yeah, that would be exactly 4 years ago then.
In Chicago, if you were a resident, and parking, of course, is a problem, but if you were a resident, I think you paid $24 to the city for a year, and that gave you preferential treatment in your parking. So there were certain spaces that were allotted to anybody that did have a sticker. So, and if anybody took your space, of course, they'd be fine generating more revenue for the city, but you still park in your space. But people aren't going to want to hike very long distances either. So it's usually going to just fall onto those people that are just within 1 or 2 blocks off the main drag.
and they're
Great. Well,
welcome.
I'm going to search around and try and find a parking study then. Thanks, Carl.
And about 2 years ago, there was a discussion about parking in residential areas in the Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee, which is part of 1PS. And there was some discussion and a proposal about having permit parking, but that never went anywhere.
My recollection is that there was a parking study, that it was started about this time last year, but it was pulled because of when the tribe announced the arena. So I'm not sure that I recall that there was a parking study that was in progress, but it was more recent than the one that Commissioner Baker mentioned, but it was never completed, or at least as far as I know. So Patrick, you can check with Flynn on that, because it was under his sort of purview on that. But I do agree with Commissioner Flanagan. We discussed this at the committee meeting, and I do support, as a general rule, with the sort of qualification that Commissioner Flanagan just mentioned, that if this happens, any revenues be used for funding alternative time transportation, such as the bus or bike share or other alternatives. So that would be my suggestion for the recommendation. But Commissioner Flanagan mentioned that, so I want to support that if this comes back for a vote at a future meeting. That'd be part of the recommendation. But otherwise, I support this. I mean, we're going to see GHG emissions inventory hopefully sometime next month, and it's not going to be pretty, all the work that we have to do, and transportation is a large portion of our GHG emissions. And if we keep kicking the can down the road for transportation or building decarbonization or whatever, we'll never get to achieve our GHG goals. So to my mind, this is something we really need to at least push forward to city council. But we'll see what happens when we get the GHG inventory next month, but it's not going to be great.
So is there general consensus that we should continue to look at this and perhaps have a more specific recommendation from Jim next month or in January?
I think there's a lot of merit in the idea and that we shouldn't just refuse to look at paid parking. It's common in most downtown areas and even in places like Santa Monica or downtown LA at $17, $18 an hour. If you can get it, it's quite expensive. So we need revenue right now as the city. It could be good. And it also gives people an opportunity to park conveniently. And I think the prices are quite reasonable.
So is there a consensus that we should continue this at a future meeting?
Yes.
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 Okay,
So I'll take a look at the parking study if I can find it, and if I edit, and I'll craft a few proposed ideas based on your comments tonight. Thank you, guys.
and I'll stay in contact with you, Jim, about scheduling it for a future meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. The next presentation is by Jen Futterman on community outreach with the Environmental Education and Collaborative Board.
Thanks, Roy. So the Environmental Education Collaborative, as many of you know, serves Riverside and San Bernardino counties, and our ultimate goal is to get environmental education into kids' lives every day. I mean, that would be the main goal. Right now, it's really challenging with the pandemic. All learning is distance learning, it's all online. So we have this really amazing opportunity with the art contest, as well as perhaps expanding the contest to reach more students. We have a symposium that the EEC puts on every year, and this year it's going to be virtual, and it's February 25th, which is a Thursday, through the 28th, which is Sunday. So it's not all day, but it will be really like attending a conference where you go in virtually and you enter into registration, and then you can go to different rooms. So we're hoping that that's a great place that we may get more attendance from teachers this year as well, because of what's going on with the pandemic, and it's very reasonably priced. I can't remember, because it's not going to be in person. It's a whole other experience. We're also planning a youth climate summit that's happening early March. So that's where we want to launch the environmental art contest announcement, and really fly it at that time. If we can get this happening before, we may be announcing it earlier, but we're hoping to get all those kids involved. So here, as the commission, we have this opportunity. We have in the past, given $350 towards the prizes with the environmental art contest. Last year, some of you are more new, but I used to work for an organization called Creek, and that was a statewide network. And so when Creek kind of changed, and I lost my job with them, then the EEC decided to take over the art contest. So it was nice to have a home for that, because I'm with you guys, but I'm rather floating in the environmental world. What was that?
No, my computer speaking.
Oh, I see. Okay. So now the art contest, is run by the EEC, and in the past, the prizes have cost $1,050, and that basically goes from pre-K through 12, and then with a special needs category, and then various categories of best environmental art, best recycled art, and there's different themes. So the EEC has decided to give $2,000 towards prizes to be able to expand the contest, and there's an extra $200 for mailing certificates and different things like that. So I wanted to propose to all of you that it looks like, who knows when we're going to be able to meet in person again. World Environment Day, it would be great if we could do something virtual, and that is June 5th. And it would be nice to do something for Earth Day as well. And, perhaps these contests can also, still somehow play into that. The World Environment Day celebration, we actually created that out of a need to have a showcase for the environmental art contest. In the past, it had been showcased at Earth Day, and one year we just didn't get enough submissions, partly because there's assessments that happen in April. So I think we're planning to still have, the same kind of timeline. The contest submissions will be due in May. We'll have judging, and then, an award ceremony. We could do, a virtual awards for World Environment Day. So what I want to propose to all of you, we've typically given quite a bit of money to World Environment Day for this in-person event and for billboards, for advertising, all of that. I don't know how much we want to spend, but I wanted to just start the dialogue today to see, it doesn't have to be cited this meeting. It could be in December or January. So, there's a little bit of time to consider and to decide. But Roy and I had a conversation. Typically this contest, I've been coordinating it for the last 15 years now, and rotating the 5 elements. So this year we would come back to water, which of course is always a great element to, as a theme for art or anything else. We'd also like to add a potential theme, and I believe this will be mostly for older kids to consider, is environmental justice. So this contest, what I love about it is it gives kids an opportunity to think critically and creatively, and to have a way to creatively express what they're thinking. So the reality is not every child is a visual artist and may have a hard time representing, these ideas in images. So I've, for a long time, been hoping to add a literary art contest. And I think that an essay contest specifically with environmental justice could be really powerful. And, there's a lot for youth to consider. I mean, we have had an adult category as well that, I think it's perfectly good to invite adults to participate. But for the kids, environmental justice, I'm not sure exactly, Roy and I discussed maybe, 3rd or 4th grade, starting there. I don't think that the younger grades, it would look really different. So, possibly even starting at 4th grade and have it 4th through 12th. If that's something that we as a commission wanted to sponsor just a certain portion of this. We are also deciding to possibly offer kind of a performance art opportunity. So it could be videos submitted. So that would be another way to creatively express. So we'd like to offer a bunch of different ways that kids could participate this year. And my question to you is, do we want to participate in this? Is this something that that you all feel that this would be a good reallocation of funds? And if so, which part of it, or if it just should go into the grand total of prizes and those are all divvied up, or if we want to sponsor a specific contest. Do you have your hand up, Jim?
Oh, no, I'm just.
Oh, okay.
I think it's great though. I like this idea. I think getting kids when they're young to get excited about this puts them on a good path going forward, and recognizing that through anything is good, even if it's a certificate or a little tiny thing is great. So I support it.
Awesome.
This does cover the entire Coachella Valley and Morongo Basin, is that right?
And actually beyond. So, the EEC covers all of Riverside and San Bernardino counties. And last year we opened it up actually internationally because of it being virtual, it's online. So we opened up the borders. We haven't decided about about that. I mean, it may, we didn't have that many projects submitted last year, so I'm not sure if it would, what that would do if, when we create more opportunities, if we would get so many submissions that it would be, too many projects to review and, give, I don't know what that looks like. So, if you have input on that also, if we should just keep it localized to, either our two counties. I mean, it definitely will be Riverside and San Bernardino County. Whether we open it up, in the past, I've had, teachers in LA want to participate, and I said no, because I wanted it to just be a more local. I mean, our two counties are huge, first of all. But, in this case, I'm not sure. I mean, I think in some ways I feel that any student that's interested and wants to participate, I want them to. It's hard to say no to that. I have a feeling it's not going to get too big, but if you all have any input on that, so there's a lot to consider right now. What part of it do we want to sponsor? And if we want a part of it to actually have, our Sustainability Commission as the sponsor for that part of the contest, that may also, bring more recognition to us, which is good, and more awareness that we exist. So, I mean, there's a part of me that feels like it might be nice to, have a specific part of it be just from the commission. Any thoughts?
I like the idea of it being just from the commission. And I think San Bernardino County is the largest county in the United States, followed by Riverside. So we're, as far as size, we're large, not with a huge population. Would you consider maybe extending entrance into San Diego, since we all kind of share similar culture and environmental concerns, separate from Los Angeles, or going into other states? So I think that there is a lot we share culturally and also environmentally. So I would definitely say anything to help get the kids in, poetry slams, anything of that nature, I think would be terrific.
I like that idea. I think you're absolutely right. I don't know if it would feel too big to include LA also, or all of Southern California. I don't know. But that's something that we can consider. And
they're less agricultural. And, to a lot of San Diego, we do have an agricultural component in our communities, which is not what you would, consider normal in Los Angeles. It's quite different.
That's true. That's true. I'm trying to remember, you said something, Sandra, that I wanted to speak to as well besides San Diego. So if we did have a part that was just for the commission, I do think that that's nice as well. Yeah, I'm forgetting. I'm sorry. I wish. Started thinking about San Diego, but
we're the big counties, and a lot of San Bernardino, not as populated as Riverside County, and not as wealthy, but you still do have a lot of families and children there that have a point of view as well.
Yes, and I remember now. So you mentioned also the poetry. So that was one thing that I thought that possibly, we could, if we wanted to sponsor perhaps just the literary contest, it could be maybe for the younger grades, it could be a poetry contest or something, not as, not an essay contest, but maybe for the older grades, it could be environmental justice with, an essay contest. And maybe for the younger grades, it could be water. I mean, there's so much that can still be done with that element. So those were some of my initial thoughts, but it would probably increase double our costs of providing prizes, for pre-K through 12 and special needs. So that's, it's a little bit more. But I think we also have money that we're not spending. So perhaps that's okay.
Or could we look at sponsorship or donations from different companies or individuals that might want to participate?
Of course, that's always an option. At this time, I don't really have time to go and solicit much. If you want to help with that, but then it's also not necessarily just coming from Sustainability Commission. So it just depends on what our purpose is, of how we want to sponsor it. If this is, something that's really coming from us, and, how we want to run that. And, part of what we contribute also may go into some kind of promotion. And if any of you were inspired, I wish that I could devote more time to this. I love being a mentor for kids, but being in my grad school right now, I can't commit to that. But if any of you would like to mentor kids, even for the essay contest, and that could be something really awesome. And I also wanted to invite you all. I will have more information about the symposium, but perhaps you all have so much varied knowledge and expertise. You may want to offer a session at the symposium. So those proposals will be due, I believe, January 11th. So I will get more information for next time as well, just to present to you, because you all have a lot to offer. And David, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I would support an environmental justice essay question. I think it's a great idea. But I would suggest if we do that we bring in some folks from the environmental justice community to assist or be responsible for the judging. I follow all the Energy Commission and PUC filings. There's a very active group called the California Environmental Justice Alliance. They're represented by the Berkeley Environmental Law Clinic, and I just checked on their website. There's a local affiliate member. It's called the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. So they are one of the lead environmental justice groups here in the Coachella Valley. And I think that if we want to do that, it shouldn't necessarily be Palm Springs for Sustainability Commission responsible for judging an issue where there are people who are active, more active than we are in the environmental justice community.
They can also provide some guidelines.
Yeah. So I can send to Patrick. I'll check because I think I know where to find it. Some contact details. I've seen these people referred to before, but I know they've been particularly active in the East Valley, and there's a lot of environmental justice, or more accurately, injustice issues that are out there. So I think it's a great idea. From the Salton Sea to various other issues that we're all aware about.
Sure.
It's a good topic.
Awesome. That's fantastic, David. I think that's a really great idea. And because this, literary art contest is brand new, we will have to provide guidelines. And so I think that that's fantastic if we have, some input from these people. So I think that's great. And also for the judging, that sounds really good to me.
There seems to be focusing in on the essay contest on environmental justice. Are there any more comments, or how should we proceed? David, could you help provide that information, and perhaps in the meeting next month, we could talk about it a little bit more?
Well, I'll check with I'll at least find the contact details for the environmental justice, this Coalition for Environmental Justice, and I'll get to at least see what they're up to, and then can add that for next month. Wasn't necessarily volunteering, but I'm happy to at least do some research.
I'll volunteer perhaps to try to interface with them to see if we can put something together if you provide that information. And I'll work.
I know where to look for at least who those people are and who to contact. So I can send that to you and to Patrick the next day or so.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And thank you everyone for your input. And, you know, perhaps we'll just think about it and come back in December and, you know, plan a little bit more.
We'll have a goal to have more information about that in December.
Sounds good.
Anything else for Jennifer? Okay, then we move on to our third presentation by Sandra Garrett, materials and fixtures for outdoor dining at restaurants.
I'll keep it to 5 minutes. As your sort of non-official boots on the ground downtown street reporter. Walking, the build out and all of that has been done kind of sporadically, and now it looks like they're going into more permanent type of build outs for dining and service areas. And it's very important. It's an incredibly popular trend globally and all of that. But I think, what's concerned me in walking by this, every morning up close and personal, I think that the primary issue is really the use of certain materials. Some of it is counterintuitive, actually. For example, stainless steel. One assumes that that's probably one of your best materials for any kind of surfaces. So what are these materials that we're using in these not so temporary build outs that we're creating? And the point is that it's about public health. So we're wanting to eliminate and try to control not just COVID, but viruses in general. And this will not be the last, sadly, sad to say. The second issue with that is anything that is done, that there's necessary frequent cleaning, disinfecting, and upkeep of these construction build-out materials, and being exposed to the elements, hot sun, wind, and so on. That's another issue. So if you've had time to go through this, if we could scroll down a little bit here. So these are the two concerns: the materials that we're choosing, and then how do we maintain those, and without getting into the personal protective equipment, which is a related but separate issue. So right now, and the study on this has come on quite fast, just since in the past 3 or 4 months. So now we know that the COVID survives the longest on plastic and steel, up to 72 hours before it will naturally fade away. So these actually are the least desirable construction and surface materials that we could be utilizing. Glass surfaces also, quite surprisingly, and this is it is even longer. So who knew? It's not porous. You would think that was something that would actually be hygienic. This also comes up. So in any of the service areas for receipts, cell phones, mirrors, glass doors, handles, all of this, these are very virus-friendly materials. The most unfriendly material that the COVID does not exist on, even without any human interference of trying to clean it, is less than 4 hours. So copper traditionally has been used for years as disinfectants, typically in kitchens, food preparation, hospitals. So a lot of that old school thinking is coming forward again. So, and that would also include bronze and brass. So right now, a lot of hospitals are increasing their use of copper and switching out the use of stainless steels for rails, hospital beds, light plates, so on and so on, bathrooms. So, stainless steel is actually not a good option, or any of those kind of metals, wrought iron and so on. Paper and cardboard survives about 24 hours. So it's not quite as unfriendly to viruses as the copper surfaces. But if it's a single-use paper, there's a plus on that, and if it's paper, it can be recycled. It's inexpensive, can be used easily and taken down and changed graphically as you need. So it gives a lot of advertising and ambience possibilities there. So, you know, end result is that plastic, steel, and glass are the most conducive surfaces and really should not be utilized. You know, the whole idea of dining and service outdoors is to help prevent infections and public health, when in fact, they are the most conducive. And this also includes the service areas, food prep, bar areas, and also the hostess area. And if we could scroll down a little bit past that. And here we have what is considered from architecture and the new build out kind of suggestions. You go through it, and we're doing most of this quite grassroots and logically. So with the exception, I think, of, that it's a minimum of 6 feet of separation. 10 to 18 feet would actually be ideal. So what I've observed is, like in a lot of the seating, it isn't even 6 feet. So by the time you get people sitting at the table, sitting in their chairs, scooting back, there may be only 3 feet in between people. So that isn't really in keeping with social distancing, but it is a minimum of 6 feet. And we really need to be more mindful about, what's preferable and not just minimum requirements. Spaces at a premium, of course. And even some of the use of plastics, which I think is, and I included, some of the decorative things, including the plastic box hedges, and that what could be worse. Not only is it going to degrade in the, in the elements in the sunshine, but that would have to be, and these are mostly at seating and eye and breathing level. These are just traps for viruses, and you can't clean them. And part of the cleaning protocols, of course, and depending on the chemicals and products that you're using, which were, in the list from the CDC, many of them need to be allowed to dry. And even though that could be facilitated with dryers, you still can't just be wiping something down and then moving on, that there is a considerable, at least an hour before you could go in again. So, some of these plastic surfaces, they could never, ever dry, and you couldn't really clean them. And then, of course, they're subject to all kinds of other problems as they start to disintegrate from constant cleaning. And again, they are virus traps. So what I'm suggesting, and most of them have done a fairly decent job just using concrete barricades, lighting, and spacing without going into a lot of expense. And a lot can be done with color and all that, creating ambience and identification for their particular restaurant or shop. So what I think before people, because this is something that we probably will continue to be doing for some time, and it's very appropriate here, for Palm Springs because of our winter season is so agreeable to this sort of dining and service. But I think it would be helpful if we could provide these businesses, restaurants, and bars and so on with a list of preferred materials and where to get them. They're doing the best that they can, but sometimes I think they're making the matter worse by utilizing some of these. And if we go down to the and I think here it lists as PPP, that should actually read personal protective equipment, not PPP. But if we can go down and look at some of the photographs, again, most of them had done sort of, like doing less sometimes was more effective as far as defining their space and controlling virus. But bathroom areas, food preparation, bar areas, hostess stations, which according to these guidelines should be eliminated. Those stations should become paperless and as touch-free as possible. So, and the workers who, could be on shift for 8 hours or so are vulnerable to this. But if we could go down to some of the photographs where the use of plastics is, and I'm not sure if that's on the next one. There's further, explaining the drop. Also, we have, we want the ventilation. This is so important. This aerosol can stay in the air for, 18 hours. So we want it to be flowing. Now here at the very top, for anybody who didn't know, Box Hedge, and this is downtown over near Coffee, and this is actual really, real life box hedge. So the use of any live plants, of course, even in ones that you were potted and you could move in and out depending as you needed, would be a wonderful thing. But here below it, we've got a very expensive and beautifully done build out, which also took up a good deal of street parking. But this is all the artificial box head. The box head was never intended, it's for display only, and it was never intended for extended outdoor use of this nature. But, as you can see, it's a highly textured surface. It's just a welcome home for any kind of virus. How can you clean it? And it surrounds this particular dining area where they've done everything else, just, almost letter perfect. So some of these things could be replaced fairly inexpensively. So I also included, and here we have it from the outside, it's beautiful street, it's beautiful at night with the lighting, the tenting and so on. And, but this is blocking ventilation. Here you see open ventilation, it's wrought iron metal, and that's fine, but it's all surrounded by concrete blockades covered with astroturf. Again, this is just a petri dish for for virus. You also have some beautiful live plants, but they've surrounded the base of it with artificial boxwood. Again, how can that ever be cleaned? And it's just there, as potential health hazard. The same thing with any of the plastic lattice work that some of them have used. It gives a beautiful garden effect, but it's plastic. And it's also not meant to withstand the constant cleaning, from the specific chemicals that we need to be using to stay healthy. And if we can go a little bit further, here you see some of that where they've combined live plants, plastic lattice, and astroturf, more of the plastic artificial boxwood. Now here, it was this was last week with Pride. So yeah, great, the flags and everything, but those were plastic. So paper would be, bunting, cotton, of course, is close, to the top as far as preferable materials. But the plastic ones, it's, there's not only is it plastic, it's also virus friendly. And and if that's not being replaced every day in the way that you could with paper, then you're creating, health issues. Or if you're doing something like that, suspend it well above the head and shoulder levels, over the, creating kind of a ceiling over your seating area with your lighting. So, there may be times where plastic materials might be useful, but certainly not at a seating or pedestrian level. Go down a little bit further. I think I usually did these as two. So, here you are about cleaning the surfaces and how to clean and all of that. And then the graphic gives you a fade out on these different substances. So copper being, an hour, and it would completely be gone within 4 hours maximum. Cardboard a little bit less, and then you see plastic. And then on the following graph, surprising, glass even exceeds plastic as far as being virus friendly. And here you just see this graphic and the, going 96 hours. So, how are you going to be cleaning this? And why are these materials being used? And then I'd also included, did research on where we can get some of these more antiviral type of surface materials, copper being the best. So surprisingly, and it doesn't have to be pure copper, which of course can be expensive, but it can just be copper covered. It, also the brass and bronze and so on. So it comes in a variety of different screens. It comes as sheets. It comes as gauze. It comes in tubes. You can use it as, you can get it in squares, so you could treat it like tiling. You can use it in all kinds of ways. And these are materials that you don't need special tools or materials. You don't need welding equipment. You can basically use a staple gun or a small, small materials like that. So it wouldn't be expensive. And the other thing with the copper mesh, it allows ventilation. It's quite attractive looking, and over time and exposure to the elements, it develops a kind of a beautiful verdigris appearance, which would certainly be in keeping with our Spanish colonial and desert design type of ambiance and look here. So,
excuse me, Sandra, there's a lot of references here that the commissioners can look at themselves. You provided a lot of good information. Need to move on. Does
sure.
anyone have any comments or questions for Sandra? Any recommendations on how to proceed? One question that I have is, if we wanted to do some of these things or make these recommendations, to whom would we do it in the city? Would it be the Planning Commission, Planning Services? Up to now, it appears that very little guidance has been provided to the restaurants for their outdoor installations because of the desire to have a very quick turnaround time and to get them set up quickly. So there hasn't been a lot of active involvement in terms of design of the outside installations.
Well, and also the lack of guidance, I think, with even the PPP for the restaurant and bar servers, where I've seen, people just wearing face shields, which are not effective. If you're going to wear a face shield, you still have to wear a mask. Otherwise, it's pointless. But I don't think we want to be giving people a sense of false security or an illusion, because that's counterproductive, and people are dying. We're in purple tier again. So I think this is something really serious. But obviously, the use of plastic, which is by far the most common offender that I've observed, should probably be looked at. And I'm not suggesting ban, but if people don't know, they don't know. And obviously, I think people think, oh, stainless steel, plastic, great. It's easy to clean, but that isn't necessarily achieving the results that we're looking for, which is public health.
So is there any other discussion or a consensus from the commissioners that we should move forward on this?
Just a quick one that a lot of if we get involved in this, I think it would depend on how long this pandemic is going to last, and if we have some kind of solution to it in the near future, we're going to be wasting our time. It's a lot of issue about are we going to get something that's going to clear it up in the next few months or not?
I don't think that's realistic. I think we have to prepare for long haul, and if it's not COVID, it's going to be something else. But this also works against common colds, flu, and any other kind of virus. So if hospitals are changing, and it's not necessarily expensive, and most of the restaurants haven't gone into a lot of expense, but the use of plastic in particular at that dining and the head level is concerning.
Totally, and I get your point. If it's not just COVID, if it's other virus, transmitted diseases, yeah, it would make sense to get involved.
Well, I think it would be helpful to see this distilled down into maybe 8 to 10 bullet points of recommendations to restaurants that are constructing these outside places. And, then they'd be able to maybe post a sign that says they're following the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission's on recommended procedures for viral reduction in our outdoor seating.
Makes a safer environment for the, for the workers and the staff there.
It's Carl again. I think we tend to live in our little ivory towers here, telling businesses what they should and shouldn't do without looking at the economic implications of these things, especially today. I know several restaurant owners that are barely keeping their doors open. And any pushback of saying, well, you shouldn't use this and you should use that. I mean, it's just not going to fly right now. I mean, quite honestly, these people are barely surviving. I mean, it's great if we could have all these alternatives, but all the restaurant owners I know on Palm Canyon cannot afford, they can barely afford what they have now. Just to get those K-rails out and to do these little MacGyvered outside patios was just an attempt to stay open.
Well, I understand that, and I know the cost of this, but in many cases, the restaurants that have done the most minimal or actually the safest, it's that use of plastic. These are virus traps, and you cannot clean them. You cannot maintain them. It's impossible.
Again, my suggestion is we should always speak to the different restaurant organizations and get their input rather than dictating from above.
I'm not suggesting dictate. I'm suggesting these are safer materials, just like you would with hand sanitizers or how you handle anything, how you handle waste. But this is a health issue. So it's not necessarily going to cost anybody any money. But why use materials that are actually increasing a problem?
I'm just saying be more cognizant of the owners. So when I went around discussing the smoking prohibitions, you would not believe the pushback, which is costing them absolutely nothing.
Well,
And then we're facing restrictions on plastics as well. Plastic utensils and foodware. So what's the consensus? Do we want to have this investigated further? It seems like there's concern about how it can be communicated. The information can be communicated to the business owners.
I don't have any problem with best practices, but I entirely agree with Commissioner Baker that, trying to sort of make this any form of mandatory or have a label or whatever. I mean,
well,
resources. I mean, if it's just a question of here's a list of
yes.
COVID unfriendly materials for you to consider,
Yes.
I don't think there's but it's just simply here's a resource, and Patrick goes to the Main Street meetings every month, and you say, well, we've developed a list of resources that you can consider, as you're building out your sort of parklet. But I wouldn't go any further than a list of resources.
But that's all I was suggesting. I'm not expecting any sort of authority or dictating at all. I'm suggesting because as a business person and a manufacturer, I understand that deeply, and it's personal to me. I'm going through this myself right now, but they don't have hours and hours and hours to research and to look into these materials. And if you're going to buy something, is it going to be this or it's going to be that, or maybe not doing it, but having a list to go to of preferred materials that are going to give you a safer environment, not only for your labor, but also for your customers and the public that are passing by. And it's not costing you anything more than plastic and steel. Steel is far more expensive. So I think that that would be helpful, but it's a friendly suggestion given to them so they can improve their businesses and maybe keep people from dying.
So would it be reasonable to ask you, Sandra, to put together a one-page document with bullet points that we can perhaps provide through Main Street or the other business organizations as friendly recommendation?
Yes.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
Just like health or feeding, you don't want to be, dictating people, but you do suggest, like maybe you want to eat like this, maybe you want to take a walk once in a while, exercise a little bit, so, no one's going to send you to jail, but it's helpful if people don't know that this is a healthier thing than this is. It contributes to public health in general. So yes, I'd be happy to do that.
So you'll plan on having it to review in the December meeting?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is meeting minutes for the October 20th regular meeting of the commission. The minutes were posted on Thursday, October 15th for city policy. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept.
Thank you, Rob. Second? Carl? Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the October 20 minutes? Please say aye.
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 Opposed or abstentions? The minutes have been accepted. Now we'll move on to the next item in the agenda, which is old business. And I think all those items are for Patrick.
Thank you. So most of this is talked about again in your update, but I did want to talk about two of the items that are on this list. One is the leaf blower ordinance enhanced enforcement, and the other is the scholarship program, to circle back on that. So with regard to the leaf blower ordinance, we've been getting more feedback from residents about their frustration with the speed and effectiveness of enforcement efforts. And so we had talked about earlier this year about trying to increase the fines for second and third offenses, and then extending the fines potentially to homeowners, or somehow finding them or somehow citing them along with the gardener, because they're really the ones that employ them. And so homeowners and businesses, I guess. And so I did work with our lawyers to put together a draft ordinance revision to reflect those things, and got some pushback about whether or not I had fully met with the 1PS group, which we had talked to the code enforcement folks, and they were very supportive. And then also doing further analysis on how we would improve the response time in addition to doing these other things. So, because if we still can't catch them, then none of this really matters. So, so anyway, one of the ideas that we had was to work with the Citizens on Patrol, and that group has sort of been defunct because of COVID concerns. And so they have not been very active. So we haven't been able to engage them. And I think they're probably the most likely candidate to help us out with this. The other suggestion that I had was that we cross-train somebody in sustainability to go out and do these, to help with the enforcement efforts as well, and do patrols and that kind of thing. So so I am just sort of throwing this out to you to see if you guys have any suggestions or thoughts about this. Anything else that we should be or could be looking into with regard to how to enhance these enforcement efforts with either current resources or any other ideas you might have about additional resources that may be helpful. So.
Patrick, I have a couple of thoughts because
Yep.
I was out in my garden. It was nice this afternoon. I was kind of done with my work until the commission meeting. So I was out gardening, and my next door neighbor's gardener was there, and it certainly sounded like a gas powered, whatever tools, because it was exceedingly loud, and my gardener has electric and it's not that loud. So, and I had pre-COVID, spoken to them, but I wasn't, I didn't have my mask with me, and I wasn't in a position to go up to them. So a question that I, two points is that, is there a way, I mean, I could have like gotten to my phone and like taken a photo of their truck. Is there a way to send this in as a code violation in the Palm Springs at Your Service app?
So there is,
Yeah.
and you can report it through the app. Typically what that does is that will generate a ticket request, and that will, if there is an officer available, they'll go out to that location. Currently there's a little bit of a frustration with the app itself, because when you take pictures,
Yeah.
it strips them down to the bare minimum.
Okay.
And so sometimes when you take a picture that is very clear on your end, it comes through as a garbled mess. And like, we can't read phone numbers on trucks or license plate numbers. And so they were supposed to look into that to see if they could fix it. But that is one of the challenges that we have with regard to photo identification of things. Sometimes it's really obvious that they're carrying, they've got the big round backpack blower that is really obviously gas. And to a certain extent, that's helpful, because we can at least say, if we follow up with a letter to the homeowner or something, we can either attach whatever picture we have, or we can say that they were photographed on this date using this. Because what happens is people often report noises and they don't report what they see. So we're left wondering whether or not it was really a gas-powered leaf blower, because the gardener's always going to say it wasn't. And so that's the challenge that we get into when we approach the homeowners, is they get really annoyed with us because they say, well, he doesn't use that. And it's like, well, actually, we have a picture of him using that. And so that's usually more helpful than not to have. So I think encouraging people to take pictures is one thing that we could do more of, that would be helpful. But again, it's not prosecutable, as they say.
Okay. All right. Well, that would have been, something I would have considered, because I said I didn't have my mask, and just, I wasn't in a position to sort of make a report. And the second point that I have, but you somewhat alluded to it, is to make sure. So my next door neighbor, it's a second home. They're rarely here. They're based in the LA area, and I think they haven't been here that often during COVID times. But so I want to make sure that if there's a letter, it goes out to the homeowner, and that I don't know whether you might have to refer to sort of property tax addresses, to that if you're sending a letter, it's sent to where they get their their property tax bill, which may be in LA or Orange County, because if you send it to my next door neighbor there, they're not going to see it because they're just not around. So,
yeah. So what I typically do is we have a parcel explorer, a GIS parcel explorer. So that gives us the mailing address and the actual physical address. So
okay, great. Yeah, that's helpful to let them know that, hey, we have the photos and it's there. So they're usually here on next Tuesdays or Wednesdays. So I'll kind of late afternoon. So I'll sort of be, keep my ears and eyes open for next week. Or whatever, because it's not the first time.
Right. Yes.
Patrick, I have a couple of things to add.
Sure.
Is that I did get a confirmation from Lieutenant Villegas that he'll be participating in the December 2nd Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee meeting. So that might be a good time to have a more detailed discussion with him. And I'm also going to ask him to talk about staffing, because that's been an issue for code compliance. So that's an opportunity to perhaps make some progress. Also, I talked to Kathy Cohn recently, and she suggested that you bring this up in your report to the 1PS membership, which will be I think, December 1st. And she also suggested that perhaps a lot of the violations are coming from houses that are vacation rentals, and suggested that perhaps talking to the property management companies that may be hiring the gardeners might be effective.
Right. Okay. Okay. Those are all good things, and I can certainly bring it up at both 1PS and the Public Works Committee. Do they, and I've gotten sort of mixed signals on the role of 1PS in this sort of a process. Is it something that we could take to them and have them vote on? Like, are they supportive of X, or do they do that? I don't know.
I see it more as getting out the information to them,
Okay.
about how to report violations, like you just explained to David,
Right.
taking pictures and so forth,
Yeah.
making them more aware of what's happening.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. I'll put those on my calendar. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on that, leaf blowers? I will, and it's kind of related to the next item, which is sustainability scholarship. So I did intend to include gardeners and leaf blowing equipment in the incentive program that we have under that scholarship program. So again, it would be another funding source for the gardeners if they so chose to get a replacement blower. And I wanted to talk with you about that a little bit because, well, I'll hold on to that for a second. So based on our conversation last time, I made some edits to the scholarship program. And so the main thing that I did was, in response to your comments, was to increase the funding ceiling for larger scale purchase, like building modifications or large equipment purchases. And then procurement of products and services, I put that at 750, and then 500 for some of the lawn care stuff. Part of the reason that I did that was I wanted to keep the lawn care stuff a little bit lower, under the $600 tax reporting threshold. And then I also felt like, based on that type of equipment, that probably $500 was probably fine. And then the other ones I wanted to provide a little more leeway, so I increased those amounts. So that's kind of what I did based on our conversation last time. One of the things that I had included in there, that description, was that they be in good standing and not have any outstanding fines with the city, which I will definitely retain. And then the other one was having them be a licensed business. And so the dilemma that we get into is the gardeners. So if we really want them to actually do this, then I would have to probably waive that requirement for them to be a licensed business, because most of the ones that probably aren't complying are probably not licensed businesses either. So I feel like that might be a little bit fraught, but I also don't really know if it would be cool for the city to be giving out money to businesses that aren't licensed either. So I wanted to sort of run that past you and kind of see what you thought of that, and see if you had any thoughts about that. So that dilemma.
Are a lot of those ground crews in that, are they contract workers or are they employees? I would assume they're contract workers.
So we're talking about individual homeowners who contract with an individual or group of individuals. Some of them may be formal companies, others of them may not be formal companies. So,
Or they're working through a larger service who then, no? Okay.
yeah,
Mom and pop companies.
they're kind of mom and pop shops.
Okay.
Patrick, my one comment is, I wouldn't say change the form, but building upgrade should be viewed in a sort of, large sense, not narrow, but, very generous about what counts as a building upgrade. In particular, I'm thinking of stuff like cool roofs or insulation. And it probably it would be considered infrastructure or an upgrade, but it isn't necessarily sort of equipment. But those are things, you recall in the cost effectiveness table, those are very highly cost effective. So I just want to make sure that, that those could qualify. And I think they do under either infrastructure and upgrade. I just make sure that we're inclusive as opposed to exclusive about what would qualify.
Yep. Yeah, it's really meant to be ideas. So I'll make sure that it's general and broad enough that it.
Yeah, thanks.
Now the question of licensed businesses, I think we should really stick to that.
Okay.
And it may provide incentive for even one or two businesses to get a license if they can benefit.
Right, and I don't think it's that cost that much for a business license here. I could be wrong, but yeah. Okay.
You're still looking at a total of $60,000.
Well, what I did was I'm gonna set aside $100,000 under each program under sustainability and recycling and just see where that takes us. I certainly wouldn't go over that, but I wasn't sure kind of how it would play out, and so I didn't necessarily want to limit it too much. But I think it'll probably be more on the recycling side and less on the sustainability side. But I don't know. So.
Looks good.
Okay. All right, so we'll stick to the licensed business, and hopefully it'll encourage people to get their business license. So, and the state program still applies for the rebate program for the lawn equipment. So, so they should take advantage of that if they have not already. Okay. All right. Well, I'll finish that off and make those tweaks, and that we're going to push that out starting in December. And start to publicize it. So, so I'll do it through, I'll let the folks at 1PS know, and the folks at Main Street know, and the various business groups. So, all right. Other than that, we're moving full steam ahead on 1383 planning. We're going to work with PSDS on scoping out our new franchise agreement. And then the greenhouse gas inventory, I actually requested that they provide us something for this meeting, but they did not do that. They're still waiting on the vehicle miles traveled information. And so if I get that, I may share that with folks before the next meeting in October. But probably the way it'll work is we'll probably share it with the Solar and Green Building Committee in early December, and then bring it back to the commission in December. And then the demo garden turf conversion effort, we are going to meet next week to talk about plant selection. So that's rolling forward, and Commissioner Miller and Commissioner Friedman are going to participate in that discussion. If anybody else wants to participate, let me know. And I think that's about it.
Patrick, just to loop back on the GHG inventory, for also the climate action roadmap, assuming that you actually get the inventory sometime next month, and we look at it committee and then commission. Do you think we're still on track to try to get the roadmap to council by January?
Yeah, I'm thinking that January would be the time frame. Yes.
Okay. As I said, I will continue to update things.
Okay.
It's 7 o'clock.
All right. Okay. So let me see here if there is anything else. Demo, yeah. So we're going to do plan selection, and then we'll come back to the group once we have kind of finalized the plant list, and bring it back to the group for approval. And that's it for old business. And then on new business, which is the next item, I don't have anything. I did not get the scope of work that I had requested, and so I have nothing to share with you at this time.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
So we'll move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports. And the first one is the Standing Subcommittee on Solar and Green Building.
All right, thank you, Chair Clark. I'll keep this brief since everything's pretty much in the written report. So there, I think we're ready to roll on the home energy assessment audit program. And that would be rolled out next month along with the sustainability scholarship. And it's good because then we have one program for homeowners and potentially for renters, and one program for residents and one program for businesses. So we're sort of hitting a lot of things. And I'll work with DC to make sure that actually both programs are publicized when they're launched. The National Renewable Energy Lab solar app. So we've been discussing with building, Patrick particularly been following up on that, and that'll probably wait until they formally launch the program. You know, I'll keep posted on that through the SoulSmart program about when that date gets launched. And finally, I'm continuing my new duties as a beta tester for the statewide codes and standards reach code program. I had a call last week with the person who's putting that together, and I've been testing a lot of bells and whistles that they're adding to the program. One of them that I thought was very helpful, ties into our GHG inventory, is that for a specific measure such as a cool roof on a house that's pre-1978, I can say that if we do this, then that will reduce, for every cool roof that goes on a pre-1978 house, it will save X amount of GHG equivalent. So that's a very powerful feature that they're adding. They actually have that data, and then we can compare it, just go to the building department and say, well, how many roof permits do you get? And so we would actually be able to extrapolate some information from that measure. I'm not sure it'll be directly available by January, but we'll see. We'll continue to play with it. As this is a beta tester, I get access prior to the formal rollout, and so I'll use that information, Patrick in particular, for the cost effectiveness table, and I'll probably be able to at least get an update for that for our committee meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that's it for me for Green Building Solar, unless Commissioner Flanagan has anything else to add.
Okay. Thank you, David. The next one is the Standing Subcommittee on Waste Reduction.
Right. So just a couple of things I wanted to touch on here. First is I wanted to mention that I've had some internal follow-up discussions with the engineering team about moving forward with some analyses for managing the flare at the wastewater treatment plant, and to assess the feasibility and engineering needs associated with expanding the anaerobic digestion system there to accommodate more food waste. So we're following up on some studies that will take actually quite a bit of time if they move forward fully. In particular, we need to work with SoCal Gas to analyze the kind of capacity and the output from the flare, such that it would tell us more information about whether or not they could take it into their system. So that is going to be a process, and the first study is about, I think it's about 6 weeks, and that'll kind of lead to another study, and then a third study, all of which would take about a year in total to really figure out all of that process. So we're following up on that and trying to pursue that line of inquiry. So that's all good. And then the Trashcan audit, on this, let's see, last Monday, I guess it was last Monday, we went out and we did a audit of the downtown trash can, similar to what we did about a year ago. And Commissioner McCann and Commissioner Clark and folks from PSDS joined us, and it was very eye-opening again. And I'm gonna turn it over to Rob to share some information about what we found. So.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a message. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
I did. So I can, let's see. I'm gonna make you the host because I don't, let's see. Security. I thought I could do that. Stop share. I'm gonna just make you host, Rob. You have to make me host though when you're done.
Okay. All right, I am the host now. Does that mean that people are seeing my screen?
If you say share screen at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
All right. I'm going to try to view that. Just 1 second, folks. I'm not sure why I can't change this to, anyway, if you can see that first page, we're good.
Yep.
All right. So yeah, we did the survey last Monday. We took a look at the contents of all of the trash and recycle containers in a particular area of the downtown. Why did we do this? I'm sure you're all asking yourselves, since we did a previous one in 2019. But the reason we did it is there were quite a few limitations with that previous one. If you see the pictures there, the recycled containers were not very well differentiated from the trash containers. They looked the same, and there were just stickers on them, essentially. And we didn't have very many recycled containers in the downtown area. So there was a real discrepancy between the numbers of trash containers and recycled containers. And again, as I just said, they were poorly differentiated. What did we find? I'll just draw your attention to these two bars here. We found that there was a lot of food packaging contamination in the recycled containers, and a lot of drink cups were in the recycled containers. And unfortunately, what we didn't know from this survey is that because people were just confusing the two types of containers because they weren't well differentiated, or was there some other reason for it? So in the interim, we have replaced those badly differentiated containers with these new ones. You'll see the two pictures. We've got a gray trash container now and a blue recycle container, both of which have the wording on them. So much more differentiation. And the second advantage for doing another survey was that we now have much more balanced numbers. 27 unpaired trash containers that we surveyed compared to 24 paired trash and recycle containers. Just one slide on our methodology. We defined a large number of categories of waste, and then we each went around to each one of these containers, opened them up, and then counted the numbers of all the different waste categories that were in those containers, and then we put them on these sheets, and then I went ahead and put them in a spreadsheet and tallied them. For various reasons that I won't go into here, I reduced all these categories because we had too many categories, and it turned out that it's much more illuminating if you consolidate some of them. So I consolidated them down to 6 aluminum and glass drink containers, plastic drink screw cap bottles. So you know what I mean by that? It's the ones where you can actually unscrew them, regardless of whether they're soft drink bottles or water bottles. Plastic drink cups is self-explanatory, along with the straws. I consolidated those. Plastic food accessories. So I consolidated a whole bunch of categories. Food containers like plastic clamshells and food carrying plastic bags and plastic utensils and plastic food wrap and plastic food packaging. The fifth one, paper drink cups, again, self-explanatory. And then the final category, food, non-plastic food accessories, like actual food waste and paper food containers and food packaging and napkins, paper napkins, foil food wrappers and styrofoam food containers. And here is the bottom line of what we found. These are bar graphs of the proportion of the total amount of different kinds of waste that were in all these containers by category that I just described. And you'll see that there's interesting patterns here. People were very good about putting aluminum and glass bottles into recycle containers and keeping them out of the waste containers, regardless of whether the waste containers were separated and on their own or whether they were paired. Same thing with plastic drink screw caps. People are good, they know about those. So that's the good side. And I want to jump right over to also the good side, which is the extreme right group, the food, non-plastic and food accompanying items. Notice how good they were with those. They put those in the trash containers and they avoided putting them in the recycle containers. So this is all good. This is what they should be doing. The bad news is these middle three. Look at plastic drink cups. Big propensity to put plastic drink cups into the recycle containers, and we don't like that. They're not recyclable. Just about even numbers on plastic food accessories like plastic clamshells, for example, and just about even numbers again once you get to the paired containers on paper drink cups. None of these things are recyclable, so this is all bad. What I'm calling them is confusion categories, because remember I said that we didn't know about the contamination that we got in our original survey with those original containers. Was it because the containers were confusable and people didn't know really which was a recycle and which was a trash container? But now we've cleaned that up. These containers are clearly separable and we're still getting the confusion. So I think the bottom line answer to all this is people are throwing this stuff in the recycle containers because they don't understand that they're not recyclable. And just to go right to this, we're going to have more of a discussion about this, Patrick, I presume, in our subcommittee meeting coming up in December.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Also, Robin, we can talk about this more too, is that I think the other this disadvantage that we have with regard to drink cups is that a lot of them were from Starbucks.
Yep.
The message that Starbucks sends is that their stuff is recyclable. And it's,
is it the case that if you go into a recyclable shop the way you used to be able to, they're expecting you to put those paper drink cups into their recycle container? I'll bet it is.
Right.
Okay. This is all bad.
Right.
They are not recyclable. So why is this useful for us to do this? What's the point of it? And the big point is our last line of defense now that we found out that there's still lots of contamination, even though the containers are really discriminable, is the education level that people don't know that these things aren't recyclable. And our last line of defense then is our signage. So we're going to design signage. We're going to put it up on these downtown containers, and then we can go back and we can redo our assessment and see what happens. The problem right now is that the signs that have been designed are all the proactive, the positive side. See the recycle right? It's all of the elements that we want people to put in recycle containers. But the results of our data are that people already know that. So it's not clear that the signage is going to give us much benefit if that's what the signage contains. Instead, it may be much more beneficial to emphasize the things that they shouldn't be putting in the recycle containers and the things that we know that they're confusing now and believe that they can throw into them. So Patrick, I think we're going to have some lively discussions in our subcommittee meeting in December about the signage and how to modify it on the basis of these results.
I'm already on the edge of my seat.
Okay, great. And that's it. Any observations or questions?
I have a question. So Commissioner Miller was the one who would inform me, thank you, Lonnie, for this about 2 years ago, about what some of these things that you think recyclable, such as Starbucks cups, which really aren't. And I thought I was a little more educated than the average person. So to see these clamshells, I mean, I thought the very same things until Commissioner Miller brought in her display a year or two ago. And that was very informative. I just think people honestly don't know.
Yep. I think these data are totally bearing that out. They don't know. And therefore they think that they're recycled, or even it may be a misjudgment on people's part. It's not that they're unclear, so they sort of decide when they get to a paired set of containers, well, I don't really know, so I'll just like throw it into whatever. I think it's more that they think that these things are recyclable.
Well, for example, paper is generally recyclable.
Yeah.
But the coffee cups are lined with plastic.
And plastic things are generally recyclable. That's if we try to do like a multiple regression on these things and see what influences people to decide to throw something into the recycle. I think the fact that something is plastic has a big impact. And so the plastic cups are going in.
Right, and they have the little recycling symbol on them, so people think that they're recyclable. But the other thing to add more confusion is that I actually asked Burtak about this in terms of whether or not those plastic, a clear plastic cup with no writing on it would be recyclable if it was empty. And they basically said not the number ones, but the number twos could be recycled.
Oh,
and
God.
it's a machine reading issue. It's not a materials issue, it's a machine reading issue. So when they do the sorting, they can sort out the number 2 cups, but they can't sort out the number 1 cups. So those get trashed. Yeah.
Well, we're never going to get to the point where we can have people make split decisions downtown, right? About based on their examining the numbers on these items. It's just never going to happen.
Right, right. So we just got to be very clear about those don't go in the recycling.
So you do research, you find out things.
Right. All right. That's it for.
Okay, now I need to return you, right? To
yes. Make me the.
Oh, I think if I go stop share, how's that?
Maybe. Sure.
I did go stop share.
I think we're almost done anyway, so you can. I think it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on to Standing Subcommittee on World Environment Day.
No news this month.
Thank you. And then Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Walkability and Pedestrian Planning.
The first meeting of the Community Advisory Committee will be tomorrow evening. And it's mostly an organizational meeting to get folks together, talk about purpose, and just kind of talk about the scope of the effort. And so Grant is on the line, and he is going to be kind of our representative from our subcommittee to that group. We got about three or four representatives from 1PS based on my last ask at the meeting last week. So that was really helpful. And one of them is actually a mom who has a kid in Catherine Finchie School too. So that's kind of a double whammy for us. So anyway, so the contractor was just following up with the participants to make sure that they registered for the meeting, because not everybody did. So I think we're going to move forward with that. I think my only caveat with that, with moving forward with the meeting, was I wanted to make sure that somebody from PS Cares was going to be on that, because I know that they are a key player here. So I wanted to make sure that they were on board. They were very excited about it. So I just wanted to make sure that they were going to be at the meeting. So plan is to move forward with that meeting tomorrow. And then after that, we'll start to release, we'll have another meeting of our subgroup, and then we'll start to move forward with kind of public outreach on kind of pedestrian surveys and a public event, that kind of thing. So that's the plan.
Thank you. The next is Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Bicycle Routes and Cycling. And I think Commissioner Flanagan has left. I did talk to him about that. And one question I have that Patrick may know the answer to was there a meeting with Lisa Middleton about bike routes in particular in the southern part of town?
Yeah, so I had a meeting along with our engineering folks with Lisa Middleton last week to talk about biking basically on South Palm Canyon and in that neighborhood. So Laverne, South Palm Canyon, that area, Murray Canyon. And we are going to make sure that we include some of that discussion in our pedestrian safety discussions, because some of that was related to pedestrian safety as well. But the city is going to be looking into opportunities to enhance our biking opportunities down there. And I believe that the thing that came up in particular was that when the idea of a road diet for South Palm Canyon south of the curve came up originally, council wasn't too excited about it, and so I think it got put on the back burner, and it was never done. But I think that was partly because there were a lot of road diets proposed, and maybe there was a certain level of concern about doing too much at one time. So I think we're going to probably bring that to the table again.
Patrick, I have some battle scars about that one. There was some community opposition from Andreas Hills on South Palm Canyon. I think this was before you joined the city, but it was a challenge. So there's a lot of history back there, and there was opposition even to Murray Canyon, which is kind of ridiculous because that's a freeway, as I know. And Laverne also, as Commissioner Flanagan knows. So I think it's a good idea. There is clearly a gap in there, but we'll have to deal with community opposition that somehow wants to drive 60 miles an hour on South Palm Canyon between Laverne and between the curve and Murray Canyon, because there are no traffic lights.
Right.
There are no stop signs and no traffic lights anywhere. So people.
Right. So I think that we're looking at a combination of things there, and there was definitely discussions about community engagement on that too. So that will follow.
Yeah, I have some materials. I'll see if because we looked at this, so I'll see if there's anything sort of historical that may be useful for back. That I'll look at my files tomorrow.
Great.
When the decision was made about Laverne, the commission did take a position and make a recommendation.
So Laverne and Murray Canyon happened. So they were all three up at pretty much the same time. Laverne and the commission actually, we made a recommendation for those, and Laverne and Murray Canyon happened, and South Palm Canyon, which would close the loop, if you will, didn't happen. So I mean, you can go on Camino Real and pass all the wonderful homes in our neighborhood, but it's kind of out of the way, and it's not a direct route. So it would be nice to close that loop.
Great. Okay, so we'll move on to Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Night Sky. Rob.
I got a letter to Patrick last week that incorporated the two recommendations from the draft of the letter last month, that the city go out and assess itself the lights that may be out of compliance with their own municipal code. And so, Patrick, who knows what the response to this is going to be.
So do we need any further input from the group on this, or is that ready to go?
I think Rob's updated letter, which is from him and me to you, is what we agreed upon the last time. So now the next step is for you to send a letter to facilities and maintenance.
Okay, sounds good.
And then going forward, I think the next step is I'll start working on incorporating other cities' ordinances and that kind of thing into a draft of an ordinance for Palm Springs.
And I'm happy to look at that, just to give you some input on sort of, on ordinance drafting. So I've done so many of them.
That would be appreciated.
Okay. Thank you. And then the next subcommittee is Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Strategic Planning and General Plan Update. Pat?
Nothing.
Okay. Next is Water Conservation.
Thank you, Chair Clark. A couple of updates from DWA meetings from earlier this month, again this morning. So at the November 3rd meeting, DWA board approved amendments to its long-term water supply contract with State Department of Water Resources, DWR, for the delivery of state water project water. That's the water through the canal, which we don't get because we get the Colorado River water instead, but that's how we measure, DWA measures its available water from the state. So the amended contract will create new flexibility for water transfers and exchanges with other public water agencies. And at this morning's meeting, long meeting, but DWA board authorized a funding agreement with DWR for environmental planning costs associated with the Delta Conveyance Project, i.e. the tunnel, in the amount of up to $1.9 million for the first 2 years. Payment of the project is spread over 4 years. And if after 2 years, DWA continues to participate through year 4, the total cost will be about $5.2 million. There's a very lengthy staff report and materials for this morning, but the board felt that building the tunnel would increase reliability on getting water, entitlement to water, because there are issues about the state water project, subsidence, earthquakes, sea level rise, etc. So they feel that the tunnel would increase the water reliability. DWA and its customers achieved a 6% reduction in potable water reduction during October 2020 compared to the same month in the 2013 baseline year. In the last 12 months, water production is down 10.13% over 2013 levels. And DWA will reevaluate its 10 to 13% water use reduction target once it receives water use objectives next year in accordance with long-term conservation legislation passed by the state legislature. And then finally, DWA is holding a webinar on pipeline replacement tomorrow at noon, and you can register on the DWA website. So that's it, and then I'll update the DWA board at their December 1st meeting based on our plan selection and moving forward on that.
Thank you, David. Next is Wellness. Carl?
Okay, excuse me. So we are reinvigorating the anti-smoking or smoking ordinance. I met with Edwin Ramanan from Human Rights Commission twice this month, and their meeting is tomorrow. Our meeting is tonight. We consolidated the two standalone ordinances into one. There were really very minor changes. I mean, I think ours was a little included cannabis, whereas theirs did not. Ours also had a few more definitions and regulations. So we're putting the two together, and hopefully we'll have one joint document to work on in December. We're meeting again this Friday.
Thank you. Great work. Finally, Desert Community Energy.
Okay, another report back. So the DC board met yesterday afternoon. The board approved a rate stabilization schedule that will be effective December 1 to adjust for increased wholesale electricity prices on a rolling 12-month basis. There's no change in the existing rate setting parameters, which provide for a 0 to 1% average total bill discount on DCE's Desert Saver product, and up to a 10% average total bill premium on DCE's 100% carbon-free product when compared to SE's average total base product bill. However, City Council will discuss in January whether utility discount program customers in the CARE and FERA programs should continue enrollment in the carbon-free as opposed to Desert Saver product, because that has an estimated annual cost to DCE of $900,000. So council may revisit the decision that they made earlier this year on that issue. DC staff and consultants are continuing negotiations with solar and wind developers to secure long-term renewable energy, and staff is expecting to bring at least one of the final contracts to the DC board for approval at the December 21 meeting. I'm not sure if I'll have a report. That's after our December meeting. I'm not sure the agenda will be available before when we meet. So that update may have to wait till January about what happens there. And then finally, DC staff is also working with Grid Alternatives to identify outreach opportunities to residents of affordable housing units that could be equipped with rooftop solar under the state's SASH program. Patrick, you had done that research on the deed restricted homes in the sort of in the Chuckwalla area. And so these are sort of city sponsored affordable housing for quite a few years ago, but they are still subject to deed restrictions, which means they would qualify for solar. And there is a little bit of money left for next year, and it's a use or lose it program from the CPUC. So we'll all work together and try to get Grid Alternatives back. They had done stuff, one of their representatives appeared way back in 2016 when we were looking at solar. They've done solar projects here in Palm Springs, and we're hoping to get them back sometime next year via DC. And that's it for DC report.
Great, thank you. So the final item on the agenda before adjournment is commissioner comments and upcoming agenda. We'll go through the attendance list and ask anybody to make comments additional comments that they might have or suggestions for the agenda for the December meeting. In the interest of time, I'd like to limit this to 1 minute for each person. So Rob McCann.
No comment.
Okay. Carl.
No comment.
Jim is left. David Friedman.
No comment.
Jennifer.
No comment.
Sandra.
No comment.
Greg.
No comment.
And Lonnie.
You had to drop off earlier.
Okay. Okay, so that was less than a minute per person. So we met our goal. I've taken notes, and we do have several suggestions for the agenda for the December.
That dog will be very excited.
Okay, so our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, December 15th at 5:30 through Zoom, most likely. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Rob. Second.
Second.
Greg.
Greg seconded too.
Okay, second and third. Okay. So the all in favor say aye.
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 The meeting is adjourned, and thank you very much for a productive meeting.
It was December 15th, Roy.
December 15th.
Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, Grant.